Hello everyone and welcome. I have another Valentine's Day card for you using Distress inks, and I'm going to be doing the negative blending technique. I'm not really sure if I ever seen anyone doing this with Distress inks. I know it from watercoloring, and I did this technique last year on this Valentine's Day card. I like this card and the technique. This is definitely a simple card to make, but because I don't have a steady hand, it was rather tricky to go around the hearts with my brush. I definitely need some practice. So I thought this technique can be easier and quicker by blending Distress inks. I picked 4 inks, picked raspberry, wilted violet, seedless preserves, and faded jeans. For this technique, you want to use inks that complement each other and can be layered on top of each other, from lightest to darkest. I also have a blending brush. The cardstock is a watercolor paper from Canson, and I also have a post-it note with full adhesive to create a mask. In order to do the negative blending technique, I needed to create masks, so I started by drawing the hearts in different sizes onto the post-it notes. You can get an actual masking paper, which might be a little bit better, but for me, that's a product that is hard to get where I live, so post-it notes are the only option I have. After I drew the hearts, I cut them out using scissors, and here the good thing with the post-it notes is that you can cut out 2 or 3 layers at once and have multiple hearts. You need a mask for each heart that you put on the card, and then you remove them all at once at the end. When blending the Distress inks, I like to have a smooth surface underneath. Here I'm using a laminated cardstock. I didn't want the panel to be moving, so I used a piece of washi and I folded it in a circle so the sticky side is showing. Then I attached the ends together and I placed it on the back of the watercolor panel. And I created 2 of those, and I attached the watercolor panel on top of the laminated cardstock. You can also use the washi and attach it along the edges of the cardstock, but I wanted to have the ink from edge to edge, and this is my solution to it. Next, I started blending the inks. I started with the picked raspberry and I covered the whole background. As you can see, for the first layer, I didn't use any masks for the hearts. Of course, you can do that. Those hearts will be in the color of the cardstock after you remove them. I just wanted all the hearts to have color, so I attached them after I applied the first layer. After that, I placed some of the hearts on top of the panel. I attached them only at places where I wanted the pink hearts to be, or more like I tried to attach them. This is where I was struggling a little bit because the post-it notes just would not stick. And on top of that, I did not notice my phone was full and stopped filming twice as I was blending the wilted violet, because that's the next layer of color that I was applying. So I had to redo the pink background, and then it happened again. So there is some footage missing. I blended the wilted violet over the whole background. Then I placed more hearts over the panel, leaving enough space for the hearts for the last layer. Also, I kept the masks on the hearts that I just blended with the wilted violet. I will be removing them all at once at the end. For the third layer, I used the seedless preserves, and again, I covered the whole background. As I mentioned, I had a problem with the masks not sticking to the background. It might be the post-it notes and that they are just not good, or it might be that I did not wait for the ink to fully dry on each layer, and the background was a little bit too slick for the hearts to stick. Normally, I would actually wait and let it air dry. Actually, that was the plan, do a layer and work on other card in the meantime. But then I had problems with filming and it was getting darker, I didn't have time to wait. I will try it in the future on another project and let you know. So for the last layer, I used the ink Faded Jeans, and after I placed the remaining hearts on the top of the panel, I blended the ink across the whole background. While the ink is blue, combined with the inks underneath, it turned into really pretty dark purple shade. As I was blending, since the hearts weren't sticking to the cardstock, I had to use a tape runner to attach them. This is a proper adhesive and it wasn't sticking either. That's why I think the problem weren't the post-it notes, but rather the background not being dry. And while the tape runner wasn't holding either, it is still important to be cautious here as it can tear up your cardstock. To keep the hearts in place, I was also using a post-it note on my fingers, and as I went over the hearts with the ink, I was holding the hearts so they do not move. After I was done with the blending, I removed all the masks, and here you can see one of the masks tore the paper, but I went carefully over it with the ink, pink raspberry in this case, and I was able to cover it up. I really like the background, and while I was struggling with keeping the masks in place, it was still easier and quicker than going around the hats with a brush. For the sentiment, I used a stamp from an older stamp set from Clearly Besotted. It says, "You mean the world to me?" As I will be heat embossing, after the panel was completely dry, I treated it with an anesthetic powder. Then I stamped it with the Versamark ink. I sprinkled an embossing powder over it. This is the metallic silver from Wow. And lastly, I melted the powder with my heat tool. Next, since I'm using distress inks, I wanted to take the advantage of it, so I splattered clean water over the panel. The distress inks reactivate the water and create really nice splatter effect. I used a paper towel to soak up the excess water, and I think the splatter really looks cool. I adhere the panel on top of a card base. I'm using here a simple double-sided tape for it. And lastly, to add a little bit of sparkle to the card, I adhered these clear jewels from Lucy's cards across the panel. I first placed the little jewels where I wanted them to be, and then one by one I dipped them in a liquid glue, and then I attached them onto the panel. So here's the finished card. I really love the end result despite all of the struggle. Actually, it wasn't really struggle, it was more like a little inconvenience, and it's definitely worth trying. If you would like to see a card with the same technique but using watercolors and no masking, check out the video on the top. And if you would like to see more inspirations for Valentine's Day, check out the playlist at the bottom. I will also include the links in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.